Ignite your own flame. Do not borrow mine, because borrowed fire was never meant to last. It burns bright for a moment, gives the illusion of strength, and then fades the instant the source is gone. When you rely on someone else's discipline, someone else's motivation, someone else's belief, you are not standing on your own feet. You are leaning. And the moment that support disappears, you fall. Many people spend their lives chasing inspiration. They listen, they watch, they admire, and for a short while they feel powerful. But admiration without action becomes dependency. Motivation without ownership becomes weakness. If your drive only exists when someone else speaks, pushes, or approves, then your strength is not yours. Igniting your own flame means taking responsibility when no one is watching. It means showing up on days when you feel nothing. No excitement, no confidence, no applause. It means choosing discipline over comfort, again and again, until effort becomes identity. This fire is quiet. It does not seek attention. It does not need permission. It grows through consistency, not intensity. Do not mistake noise for power. Loud motivation fades quickly. True fire is built in silence, in routine, in repetition that feels boring and heavy. It is forged when you continue despite doubt, when you train despite resistance, when you move forward without reassurance. That is where real strength is formed. Borrowed fire creates comparison. You look at others and measure yourself against their progress, their speed, their results. This steals your focus. You stop listening to your own rhythm and start chasing someone else's pace. But their path is not designed for you. What fuels them may drain you. What challenges them may break you. Your flame must be shaped by your own struggles, not theirs. Igniting your own flame also means accepting pain. Growth is not comfortable. Discipline is not gentle. There will be days when effort hurts, when progress feels invisible, when quitting seems reasonable. Borrowed fire avoids these moments. Your own fire is born in them. Pain is not a sign to stop. It is a sign that something is being built. Do not wait for perfect conditions. They do not exist. Do not wait to feel ready. Readiness comes from action, not thought. Every time you delay, you weaken your ability to act. Every time you act despite hesitation, you strengthen it. This is how inner fire is trained. When you ignite your own flame, you stop seeking validation. Praise becomes irrelevant. Criticism loses its power. You no longer move to be seen, but to become. Your effort is no longer performative. It is personal, and because it is personal, it is unstoppable. The world is full of people who burn brightly and disappear. They start strong and vanish quietly, not because they lacked talent, but because they lacked ownership. They borrowed energy instead of building discipline. They chased motivation instead of creating structure. Your flame will not impress everyone. It will not always be visible, but it will sustain you when everything external disappears, when no one is whelping, when no one believes. Ignite your own flame by mastering your habits, by controlling your reactions, by committing to consistency over comfort, by choosing effort over excuse. This fire will not explode, it will endure. And once your flame is strong, you will not need to borrow anyone else's light. You will walk your path with clarity, stability, and strength that does not depend on the presence, approval, or energy of anyone else. Responsibility begins within, long before it is expressed in words or actions, and long before it is recognized by the outside world. It is not assigned, demanded, or inherited. It is accepted. The moment a person understands that their life is shaped less by circumstances and more by their responses, responsibility quietly takes root. This realization is uncomfortable because it removes the comfort of blame. When responsibility begins within, excuses lose their power, and so does the habit of waiting for someone else to intervene, rescue, or decide. Many people search outward for direction, validation, or motivation, believing that responsibility will arrive once conditions are perfect. They wait for clarity, support, or opportunity, unaware that responsibility is not something that appears after preparation. It is the preparation. Taking responsibility internally means acknowledging that even confusion is yours to face, even weakness is yours to train, and even failure is yours to learn from. This internal ownership transforms problems from obstacles into tasks and hardships into lessons. Responsibility that begins within does not mean control over everything. It means accountability for what is within reach. You cannot command outcomes, but you can command effort. You cannot rewrite the past, but you can choose how it shapes you. When people deny this inner responsibility, they surrender their power without realizing it. They hand their growth to circumstances, their emotions to others, and their future to chance. This surrender often disguises itself as victimhood, a mindset that feels safe but slowly erodes self-respect. When responsibility is internal, discipline becomes personal rather than imposed. Actions are no longer driven by fear of punishment or hunger for praise, but by alignment with one's own standards. This is a quieter form of strength. It does not announce itself or seek approval. It simply shows up repeatedly, even when no one is watching. This inner discipline builds trust with oneself, and self-trust is the foundation of confidence. Without it, motivation becomes fragile, easily broken by inconvenience or doubt. Responsibility beginning within also changes how one views failure. Instead of seeing failure as evidence of inadequacy, it becomes information. Each mistake points to a skill not yet developed, a habit not yet corrected, or an assumption not yet questioned. This perspective requires humility, because it demands honesty without self-pity. Blaming others may protect the ego in the short term, but it prevents growth. Owning mistakes may sting, but it sharpens awareness and accelerates improvement. Relationships are also transformed by internal responsibility. When individuals stop expecting others to manage their emotions, meet their unspoken needs, or carry their burdens, relationships become lighter and more honest. Responsibility within does not mean isolation, it means contribution. A person who governs themselves well brings stability rather than dependency, clarity rather than chaos. They communicate instead of accuse, listen instead of react, and act instead of complain. There is also a moral dimension to responsibility that begins within. Integrity is not about being watched. It is about choosing consistency between thought, word, and action. When responsibility is internalized, values are practiced even when they are inconvenient. This inner alignment creates a sense of order that cannot be shaken easily by pressure or temptation. It builds character silently, through countless small decisions that no one applauds but all accumulate. The difficulty of internal responsibility lies in its loneliness. No one can do it for you, and no one can truly see it. It requires sitting with discomfort, resisting distraction, and confronting personal limitations honestly. Many avoid this process because it strips away comforting illusions. Within that discomfort lies freedom. When you stop waiting for others to change, improve, or approve, momentum returns. Life becomes something you participate in rather than observe. Responsibility that begins within does not guarantee success, happiness, or ease. It guarantees agency. It ensures that regardless of outcome, you remain engaged, learning, and evolving. This inner responsibility is not a destination, but a continuous practice, renewed each day through choices that reflect awareness rather than impulse, commitment rather than convenience, and ownership rather than avoidance. Borrowed fire always fades because it was never meant to belong to you. It may ignite excitement, push you forward for a moment, or make you feel powerful, but its source is external, and what is external is unstable. Motivation drawn from someone else's words, achievements, or energy is like standing close to a flame on a cold night. The warmth is real, but it disappears the moment you step away. Without your own fire, you are left dependent, searching again for another source of heat. Many people confuse inspiration with fuel. Inspiration can spark awareness, but it cannot sustain effort. When progress depends on borrowed fire, action becomes inconsistent. You move when someone encourages you and stop when silence returns. This creates a cycle of highs and lows that exhausts the mind and weakens commitment. The individual begins to associate progress with external stimulation rather than internal resolve, and over time, this dependence dulls self-belief. Borrowed fire often comes in the form of comparison. Seeing another's discipline, success, or confidence can create a temporary surge of energy. You try to mirror their routine, their mindset, their pace, hoping their fire will light your path. But comparison shifts focus away from self-mastery and toward imitation. What worked for one person may not fit another, and when imitation fails, frustration replaces motivation. The borrowed flame flickers, and doubt rushes in to fill the space it once occupied. There is also danger in borrowing fire from praise and validation. Compliments can lift you, recognition can energize you, but when your effort relies on approval, your direction becomes fragile. The moment appreciation fades or criticism appears, momentum collapses. You begin to question your worth and direction, not because the work lost meaning, but because the external reward disappeared. This creates a dependency that traps growth behind the opinions of others. Borrowed fire fades because it does not require responsibility. When motivation comes from outside, effort feels optional. If someone else lights the flame, someone else is blamed when it goes out. This subtle avoidance of responsibility keeps people stuck. They wait for the next speech, the next role model, the next push, believing that someday motivation will stay. What they fail to realize is that lasting fire is built through discipline, not excitement. True fire is forged through repetition in moments of resistance. It grows when action is taken without emotional readiness, when effort continues despite boredom or discomfort. Borrowed fire avoids these moments. It thrives on intensity, not consistency. That is why it burns brightly at first and dies quickly. It cannot survive routine, silence, or struggle. Only a fire built through deliberate practice can endure those conditions. Borrowing fire also weakens identity. When motivation is external, the sense of self becomes unstable. You begin to define yourself by what moves you rather than what you stand for. This leads to constant searching, jumping from one source of motivation to another, never settling long enough to build depth. Without internal fire, direction changes easily, goals shift frequently, and progress remains shallow. Internal fire is quieter but heavier. It does not rush, it endures. It is not dependent on mood, recognition, or comparison. It is born from clarity, from knowing why effort matters even when no one sees it. Building this fire requires patience, because it does not deliver immediate excitement. It delivers steadiness. Many abandon the process before the flame strengthens, mistaking calm resolve for lack of passion. Borrowed fire can start the journey, but it cannot sustain it. It can introduce you to possibility, but cannot carry you through repetition, failure, and doubt. At some point, everyone faces a moment where external motivation is absent. In that silence, borrowed fire vanishes, and only what has been cultivated within remains. Those who have relied solely on external energy feel lost, while those who have trained internal discipline continue moving, unaffected by the absence of applause or encouragement. When the fire is yours, it does not need to burn loudly. It only needs to burn steadily. It adapts to hardship, survives disappointment, and strengthens with use. Unlike borrowed fire, it does not demand constant feeding from the outside world. It feeds itself through commitment, responsibility, and clarity, growing stronger with every challenge faced alone. Pain is a teacher, not an enemy, yet most people spend their lives trying to silence it, escape it, or deny its presence. This resistance comes from misunderstanding its purpose. Pain is often seen as a sign that something has gone wrong, when in reality it is a signal that something is changing. It marks the boundary between what is familiar and what is possible. Without pain, growth would be shallow, awareness would be dull, and progress would lose its direction. From the moment effort begins, pain appears. The body aches when it is pushed beyond comfort. The mind strains when it confronts uncertainty, and the spirit tightens when it faces loss or failure. These sensations are not punishments, they are feedback. Physical pain teaches the limits of strength and the necessity of recovery. Mental pain reveals gaps in understanding and weaknesses in discipline. Emotional pain exposes attachments, expectations, and unexamined beliefs. Each form of pain carries information that cannot be learned through ease. Avoiding pain may offer temporary relief, but it also delays learning. When discomfort is constantly escaped, the underlying lesson remains untouched, waiting to return in another form. This is why patterns repeat in life. The same struggles resurface because their instruction was ignored. Pain persists not because it is cruel, but because it is patient. It waits until attention is given, until reflection replaces reaction. Pain becomes an enemy only when it is misunderstood. When people fight pain instead of listening to it, they waste energy resisting what could guide them. This resistance often manifests as blame, denial, or distraction. Blame shifts focus outward, denial suppresses awareness, and distraction numbs sensation. None of these responses resolve the source. They only delay the moment when pain must be faced again, often with greater intensity. Learning from pain requires stillness and honesty. It demands the courage to ask what needs to change rather than who is at fault. This is uncomfortable because pain often reveals responsibility. It points to habits that need correction, boundaries that need strengthening, or truths that need acceptance. Growth begins the moment pain is treated as a message rather than a threat. In that moment, suffering transforms into insight. There is a difference between pain and suffering. Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Suffering arises when pain is resisted, judged, or prolonged by thought. When pain is accepted as part of the learning process, its intensity lessens. It still exists, but it no longer controls behavior. Instead, it informs decisions. This shift changes how challenges are approached. Difficulty becomes training rather than obstruction. Pain also builds resilience. Each time it is faced without avoidance, tolerance increases. The nervous system adapts, the mind becomes steadier, and confidence grows quietly. This resilience is not aggression or hardness, it is adaptability. It allows a person to remain present under pressure without collapsing or reacting impulsively. Over time, pain loses its power to intimidate because familiarity replaces fear. Emotional pain carries some of the deepest lessons. Rejection teaches self-worth beyond approval. Loss teaches impermanence and presence. Failure teaches humility and precision. These lessons cannot be taught intellectually, they must be lived. Though emotional pain feels overwhelming, it often sharpens awareness more than comfort ever could. It strips away illusions and forces clarity. Those who face it directly emerge with depth rather than bitterness. Pain also refines intention. When something hurts enough, priorities become clear. Distractions fall away, and what truly matters surfaces. Comfort can blur purpose, but pain clarifies it. It forces choice. Either patterns change or pain continues. This confrontation with reality strengthens decision-making and commitment. It is often in moments of greatest discomfort that the most honest decisions are made. Treating pain as a teacher does not mean seeking it unnecessarily or glorifying suffering. It means respecting its presence and responding intelligently. Not all pain should be endured. Some pain signals harm rather than growth. Wisdom lies in discernment. The lesson is not to chase pain, but to listen when it arrives and respond with awareness rather than fear. Over time, a different relationship with pain develops. It no longer signals danger alone, but opportunity. The mind learns that discomfort does not mean failure, and the body learns that strain can coexist with control. This understanding transforms how effort feels. Challenges are no longer threats to stability, but invitations to expansion. Pain loses its role as an enemy and becomes a guide, shaping strength, clarity, and self-mastery through experience rather than avoidance. Comparison is a silent thief because it steals without announcing itself. It enters quietly, disguised as motivation or awareness, and before it is noticed, it has taken focus, confidence, and clarity. Many people believe comparison helps them measure progress, but more often it shifts attention away from personal growth and toward external judgment. The moment attention turns outward, the internal compass weakens, and direction becomes uncertain. The habit of comparison begins early and embeds itself deeply. People learn to evaluate themselves based on others' achievements, appearances, or recognition. At first, this seems harmless, even useful. But over time, comparison replaces self-observation with self-judgment. Instead of asking whether they are improving, individuals ask whether they are ahead or behind. This subtle shift changes effort into anxiety and learning into pressure. Comparison steals joy by redefining success. What once felt meaningful loses value when measured against someone else's results. A personal milestone becomes insignificant because another has gone further. Progress becomes invisible, not because it is absent, but because attention is fixed elsewhere. This creates dissatisfaction even in moments of genuine growth. The thief works silently, convincing the mind that nothing is ever enough. Comparison also distorts perception. People compare their internal struggles to others' external presentations. They see confidence without seeing doubt, success without seeing sacrifice, discipline without seeing fatigue. This incomplete picture fuels insecurity. It creates the illusion that others advance effortlessly while one struggles alone. The result is discouragement rooted not in reality, but in misinterpretation. Another cost of comparison is imitation without understanding. In an effort to keep up, individuals copy routines, goals, and behaviors that may not align with their nature or circumstances. What works for one person may not work for another, yet comparison pressures conformity. When imitation fails, self-trust erodes. Instead of adjusting the approach, people blame themselves, unaware that the path was never theirs to begin with. Comparison also fragments attention. Energy that could be invested in improvement is spent monitoring others. This constant outward scanning interrupts flow and weakens concentration. Mastery requires immersion, yet comparison pulls the mind out of the present task and into evaluation. Progress slows not because of lack of ability, but because attention is divided. The silent theft continues by undermining identity. When worth is measured relative to others, self-definition becomes unstable. Identity shifts depending on who is nearby, who is succeeding, and who is failing. Confidence rises and falls based on external reference points rather than internal standards. This instability creates emotional dependency, where self-esteem is no longer self-generated but externally regulated. Comparison can also breed resentment or arrogance, both equally damaging. When others appear ahead, envy emerges. When others appear behind, superiority follows. Neither state supports growth. Envy drains energy through bitterness, while arrogance blinds learning through complacency. In both cases, attention remains fixed on others rather than on self-improvement. True progress requires comparison of a different kind. Not outward, but inward. Measuring today's actions against yesterday's effort builds clarity. Observing patterns, habits, and consistency provides useful feedback. This internal comparison encourages responsibility without self-judgment. It focuses on trajectory rather than position. Freedom from comparison does not mean ignoring others. Others can inspire, teach, and challenge, but without becoming reference points for self-worth. Inspiration elevates without diminishing. Comparison diminishes while pretending to motivate. The difference lies in intention. One draws lessons, the other draws conclusions. When comparison loosens its grip, energy returns. Focus sharpens. Effort becomes quieter and more deliberate. Goals regain meaning because they are chosen, not imposed. Progress becomes personal rather than performative. There is less urgency to prove and more commitment to practice. The silent thief loses power the moment awareness replaces habit. Each time attention returns inward, something is reclaimed. Confidence rebuilds through consistency. Satisfaction grows through alignment. Growth becomes sustainable because it is no longer fueled by rivalry or insecurity, but by purpose and discipline. In that space, development unfolds at its own pace, unaffected by timelines that belong to others and standards that were never meant to define anyone's path. Consistency is stronger than passion because passion is an emotion, and emotions rise and fall without warning. Passion can ignite action quickly, but it cannot be relied upon to remain present when conditions change. It thrives in moments of excitement and disappears when effort becomes repetitive or uncomfortable. Consistency, on the other hand, does not depend on how one feels. It is built on decision rather than desire, and that makes it durable. Passion often creates powerful beginnings. It inspires ambitious goals, intense effort, and dramatic commitment. In the early stages, progress feels fast and rewarding, but when novelty fades, passion weakens. Routine replaces excitement, and resistance appears. This is where many efforts fail. Without consistency, momentum collapses the moment enthusiasm declines. What was started with intensity is abandoned due to lack of structure. Consistency works quietly. It does not demand emotional readiness or perfect conditions. It shows up on ordinary days, in small actions repeated over time. These actions may feel insignificant in isolation, but their accumulation creates change. Consistency compounds effort, turning modest discipline into substantial progress. While passion seeks immediate results, consistency trusts the process. Relying on passion creates dependency on mood. When energy is high, action follows. When energy is low, effort stops. This inconsistency disrupts learning and weakens skill development. Mastery requires repetition, and repetition requires consistency. Skills are not built during moments of excitement alone, but during periods of monotony where discipline sustains effort without stimulation. Consistency also builds identity. Each repeated action reinforces self-image. When a person consistently acts in alignment with their goals, they begin to see themselves differently. This self-perception strengthens commitment. Instead of relying on motivation, action becomes automatic. Behavior shifts from effortful choice to habitual response, reducing internal resistance over time. Passion can be misleading. It can convince someone that strong feelings alone are enough to guarantee success. This belief creates unrealistic expectations. When difficulty arises, the absence of passion is mistaken for a sign to quit rather than a natural phase of the process. Consistency reframes difficulty as part of the journey, not a signal to stop. Consistency also develops resilience. By continuing through discomfort, frustration, and doubt, tolerance increases. The mind learns that progress does not require emotional comfort. This resilience reduces fear of failure because effort no longer depends on confidence. Even uncertainty becomes manageable when consistency anchors action. Another strength of consistency is its adaptability. Passion often pushes too hard, too fast, leading to burnout. Consistency respects limits and adjusts pace. It allows for rest without abandonment, effort without exhaustion. This balance makes long-term commitment possible. While passion burns intensely and briefly, consistency burns steadily. Consistency also simplifies decision-making. When habits are established, fewer choices are required. This reduces mental fatigue and preserves energy for meaningful challenges. Passion demands constant renewal. Consistency creates structure that supports sustained effort even during stressful periods. The results of consistency may appear slower at first, but they are more reliable. Progress becomes predictable, and improvement becomes measurable. Over time, consistency often surpasses passionate effort that lacks endurance. Many achievements attributed to talent or motivation are, in reality, the outcome of persistent, repeated action. Consistency strengthens trust in oneself. Each day of showing up reinforces belief in one's ability to follow through. This self-trust is more powerful than excitement. It creates stability during uncertainty and clarity during doubt. When self-trust is strong, motivation becomes less necessary because action is no longer negotiated internally. Passion still has value. It can inspire direction and provide energy at the start, but without consistency, it remains potential rather than progress. Consistency transforms intention into reality. It turns vision into practice and effort into outcome. Over time, consistent action often reignites passion, not as an emotion, but as quiet confidence built through proof of commitment and accumulated discipline. Master yourself before seeking the world, because the way you engage with anything external is determined by what is unresolved within. Without self-mastery, ambition becomes scattered, effort becomes reactive, and success becomes unstable. People often rush outward in search of recognition, achievement, or control, believing that external victories will create inner order. In reality, the opposite is true. Inner order is what allows external pursuits to be sustained without collapse. Self-mastery begins with awareness. Before directing energy toward the world, one must understand their own patterns, triggers, and tendencies. Unexamined habits quietly dictate behavior, often against conscious intention. Without awareness, effort is wasted correcting outcomes instead of causes. Mastery requires observing thoughts without immediate reaction, emotions without suppression, and impulses without blind obedience. This observation creates space between stimulus and response, where choice becomes possible. Seeking the world without mastering the self leads to constant friction. External challenges amplify internal chaos. Stress exposes impatience, authority exposes insecurity, and success exposes ego. Without internal discipline, increased responsibility magnifies weaknesses rather than strengths. Many struggle not because the world is too demanding, but because their internal systems are unprepared to handle pressure. Self-mastery is the training that strengthens these systems. Control over attention is a critical aspect of mastering the self. Attention determines what grows. When attention is fragmented by distraction, comparison, or impulse, effort loses effectiveness. Mastery involves directing focus deliberately, even when temptation pulls elsewhere. This skill is foundational. Without it, learning is shallow and progress is inconsistent. With it, even simple actions gain depth and impact. Emotional regulation is another pillar of self-mastery. Emotions are powerful signals, but when they dominate behavior, they distort judgment. Reactivity leads to regret, conflict, and inconsistency. Mastery does not mean suppressing emotion, but understanding it. By recognizing emotional patterns, responses become intentional rather than automatic. This steadiness allows one to navigate conflict, uncertainty, and criticism without losing direction. Self-mastery also involves aligning action with values. Without clear values, effort becomes directionless. Goals shift, priorities blur, and decisions become reactive to circumstance. Values provide internal guidance that remains stable regardless of external conditions. When actions align with values, effort feels grounded rather than forced. This alignment builds integrity, which is essential for sustainable influence and leadership. Seeking the world without self-mastery often results in dependence on validation. Approval becomes fuel, and criticism becomes threat. This dependence weakens autonomy and distorts decision-making. When self-worth is internally anchored, feedback can be received without collapse or arrogance. Praise informs without inflating, and critique instructs without diminishing. This emotional independence allows growth without attachment to outcome. Discipline is the structure of self-mastery. It transforms intention into consistent action. Discipline is not restriction, it is organization. It prioritizes long-term outcomes over short-term comfort. Through discipline, habits replace willpower, reducing internal resistance. This consistency builds momentum that carries effort forward even when motivation fades. Mastery of the self also includes understanding limitations. Pushing blindly without rest or reflection leads to burnout. Knowing when to exert effort and when to recover is part of control. This balance preserves energy and clarity. It ensures that progress is sustainable rather than explosive and short-lived. When self-mastery is absent, the pursuit of the world often becomes a form of escape. Achievement is used to avoid introspection, business to avoid stillness, and ambition to avoid discomfort. These pursuits may produce visible success, but they leave underlying instability untouched. Eventually, unresolved inner conflict surfaces, often at moments of greatest pressure. Mastering the self creates a stable foundation from which the world can be engaged effectively. Effort becomes focused, decisions become clear, and challenges become manageable. Influence grows naturally from consistency rather than force. Leadership emerges from example rather than assertion. Success, when it comes, does not destabilize because identity is not dependent on outcome. The world does not need to be conquered before the self is understood. Attempting to do so reverses the order of growth. By cultivating awareness, discipline, emotional regulation, and integrity internally, external pursuits become expressions of stability rather than compensations for its absence. In mastering the self first, engagement with the world becomes deliberate, grounded, and resilient under pressure.